Geographic mobility is the measure of how populations and goods move over time. It is commonly used in demography and human geography. These moves can be as large scale as international migrations or as small as regional community arrangements. Global population and mobility. Our world is getting smaller and smaller as we people deal with so much changes in terms of economics, governments, and populations that brought each country into its development because of globalization. Talking about globalization, it has so many topics to deal with. One of its global population and mobility, such as global cities, global demography, and global migration. To understand, global population is the total number of people globally who currently living here on Earth. It gives data and information to identify the growth of the particular country. Mobility, in the other hand, it is where people are allowed to move freely and has the occurrence of movement or change in place or even residency. Connection of global population to mobility. So, the connection between global population and mobility is that people tend to relocate themselves to which they can find opportunities to have a good source. Sometimes, otherly, with their spouse, they get an income. Change applying and building business outside their places. That's why the mobility result to have is global population. Global city. Global city is an urban center that enjoys significant competitive advantages and that serves as a hub within a globalized economic system.
Our topic for today is the global city. So for you, what is global city? What is global city truly? So our topic is the global city. 1.1. We hear a lot of talks these days about so-called global cities. But what is global cities? In our mind, what is global cities? But based on a search in Google, global city is an urban center that enjoys significant competitive advantages and that serves as a hub within a globalized economic system. So that is the meaning from Google. But you will find out. Saskia Sisen literally wrote the book on global cities back in 2001. Through her global cities works dates back over a decade prior to the book. She gave a definition that has a long struck with me. In short form, in the age of globalization, the activities of production are scattered on a global basis. 2.2. This complex, globalized production networks requires new forms of financial and producer services to manage them. These services are often complex and require highly specialized skills. Thus, they are subject to agglomeration economics and tend to cluster in a limited number of cities. Because specialized talent and firms related to different specialties can cluster in a different cities. This means that there are actually a few of these specialized production nodes because they don't necessarily directly compete with each other, having different groupings of specialties. 1.3. In this world then, a global city is a significant production point of specialized financial and producer services that make the globalized economy run. Sassen covered specifically New York. So, Sassen covered specifically the New York. Secondly is London. And lastly is Tokyo. In her book, but there are many more global cities than this. So these are some examples of the cities that are globalized. So first is New York, secondly is London, third is Tokyo, fourth is Hong Kong, fifth is Paris, 6 is Singapore, 7 is Los Angeles, 8 is Shanghai, 9 is Beijing, 10 is Seoul, 11 is Chicago, 12 is San Francisco, 13 is Toronto, 14 is Sydney, 15 is Berlin, 16 is Boston, 17 is Moscow, 18 is Amsterdam, 19 is Dubai, and lastly is Istanbul. So those are the cities that globalized. So thank you for watching. I hope you have learned.
Global economy 1.4. The question then becomes how to identify these cities and perhaps to determine to what extent they function as global cities specifically. Beyond all of the other things that they do simply as cities, naturally this lends itself to our modern desire to develop degree tables. So my explanation to 1.4, the function of the global city is a significant production point of specialized financial and procedure producer services that make the globalized economy run like for instance the big cities of the Philippines, the Metro Manila city, Davao City, and the Cebu city. These cities are highly can create and produce a large economic income in our country that can help the most. 1.5. A number of studies were undertaken to produce various rankings. However, when you look at them, you see that definition of global city use is far broader than Sassin's core version. Wikipedia lists some of the general characteristics people tend to refer to when talking about global cities. It cites a very lengthy list, but some of them are 1.5.1 home to major stock exchanges and indexes. 1.5.2 influential and international political affairs. 1.5.3 home to world-renowned cultural institutions. 1.5.4 service a major media hub. 1.5.5 large mass transit networks. 1.5.6 home to a large international airport. 1.5.7 having a prominent skyline. For my explanation in 1.5, in this text, we can choose where we can understand of any version of the book of the global city as long as we can relate and understand it. For my explanation in 1.5.1, home to major stock exchanges and indexes. This is the producer of any large materials of the other number cities. They can provide the exact number of any things or materials that they needed. For my explanation in 1.5.2, influential in international political affairs. In this case, the Metro Manila cities is a highly recommended because this is where the high rank of government live, where they create and improve any of our laws and regulation. They can communicate the other countries to continue their good relationship to each other. And also, they discuss the political affairs and the peace related issues to the country.
For the 1.5.3, home to world-renowned cultural institution. In this point, our government developed and improved our world-renowned culture in the country because they can assure that we have a unique and beautiful life, beautiful culture, and many people will come or visit our our country and can create and earn a big profit profit to our cities. This program is very helpful because they encourage many people in the country that they need to love and protect our own culture. For the 1.5.4, service a major media hub. In this point, the service is highly improved and developed because this is important. If one company has a good services, then many people will visit and praise them, and this is a good advantage to have a better result for economy. For the 1.5.5, large mass transit networks, the transformation of any of the network are fast, much easier way to develop and transaction if we have a better network to help us as you can produce and receives any services rapidly. For the 1.5.6, home to a large international airport. This is important so that many people to each country visit our tourist spot and many more. This is the start. This is the start of having as good economy towards of our cities. Having a large international airport is the way of fame and success to our many cities here in the Philippines. For the 1.5.7, having a prominent skyline. So having a prominent skyline is a good advantage to develop a new improvement to our cities. For the 1.6, as you can see, this is quite a hodgepodge of items, many of which are only tangentially related to globalization per se. In effect, many of them seek to define cities only in terms of global prominence, rather than functionally are related to the global economy. That's certainly a valid way a valid way to look at it, but it raises the point that we should probably
Global City 1.7. To clarify our thinking, let's look at how various ranking studies have defined global city for their purposes. The purpose in this section, therefore, is to produce an inventory of the world cities in terms of their prevention of corporate services. The basic unit analysis in this assessment is the service firm. The firms we deal with all have multi-city, multi-state locations, and it is the geographical pattern of this organization which is used to investigate world city formation. For a given city, we are looking at the presence of major corporate service firms. By studying several firms over many cities, we are able to obtain the relative importance of given city in terms of a particular service. By carrying out this exercise for several services, we can evaluate the overall world cityness of a given city. 1.7.1. One of cited such ranking was our 1999 research paper called A Roster of World Cities. The authors John Verstack, Richard G. Smith, and Peter J. Taylor reference Sassen's work seeking to define global cities in terms of advanced producer services, both directly for a consumer and for firms producing other goods for consumers are common to all cities, of course. What we are dealing with here are generally referred to as advanced producer service or corporate services. Unfortunately, we are not dealing here with data which automatically in the public realm, so that our analysis are dependent upon information availability through investigate means involving trade decretories, proportional, magazines, internal, partner, listings in WordWeb searches. We have managed to put together data for 4 significant corporate services from which we can provide estimates of a city global service capacity. 17.2. Taking our cue from SASE 1991-126, we treat world cities as particular, post-industrial sites wherein innovations and corporate services and finance have been integral to the recent restructuring of the world economy, now widely known as globalization. This is a consequence of a general corporate growth and reorganization over the last 3 decades, which are resulted simultaneously in a dispersion of production in more routine office services and a concentration of advanced services necessary to manage and organize the dispersion with growth in the scale of these services. Opportunities have increased for the rise of specialist corporations serving other globalizing firms. It is the former whose agglomeration needs in terms of information complexes are to be found located in selected cities, world cities across the world. 1.7.3. They took lists of firms in 4 specific service industries: accounting, advertising, banking, and law, and determined where those firms maintain branches and such around the world. In order to determine the importance of various cities as production nodes of these services, this has some weaknesses, in that it does not necessarily distinguish whether, say, a particular accounting firm is doing routine type work of the sort accountants have always been doing, or performing advanced work of a type specific to globalization, but it at least tries to derive less related to the production of services. The 4 services: accountancy, advertising, banking, and law are different enough to produce some interesting contrasts between geographical patterns, but the overall similarity of their worldwide locations give us confidence that aggregating the 4 sets of results produce a sound inventory of contemporary world cities and a term of the service capacities. 1.7.4. As the global city concept grew in popularity, various other organizations entered the fray. Most of these newer lists take a very different, a much broader approach closer to the Wikipedia type list of characteristics rather than assassin-like definition. Wikipedia lists some of the general characteristics people tend to refer to when talking about global cities. It cites a variety list, but some of them are, as you can see, this is quite a hodgepodge of items, many of which are only tangentially related to globalization per se, and in fact many of them seek to define cities only in terms of global prominence, rather than functionally as related to the global economy.
Good day everyone, this is Rizlin de Arsola and this is the continuation of our topic which is the global city. One example is A.T. Kearney's list developed in conjunction with Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Their most recent version is the 2012 Global Cities Index. This study uses criteria across 5 dimensions. First, we have business activity, headquarters, services firms, capital markets values, number of international conferences, and the value of goods through ports and airports. Second, we have human capital, the size of foreign-born population, equality of universities, number of international schools, international student population, and the number of residents with college degrees. Third, we have information exchange, the accessibility of major TV news channels, internet presence, basically the number of search hits, number of international news bureau censorship, and broadband subscribers rate. Next, we have cultural experience, the number of sporting events, museum, performing arts venues, the culinary establishment, international visitors, and sister city relationship. Last, we have political engagement, the number of embassies and consulates, think tanks, international organizations, and political conferences.
Good day, everyone. My name is Rihanna S. Atam. Our topic for today is all about the Institute for Urban Strategy at the Mori Memorial Foundation in Tokyo published another study called the Global Power City Index 2011. The Global Power City Index provides a rating of the urban competitiveness of 35 world cities based on their international magnetism. This report examines cities in terms of functions demanded by several actor types: manager, researcher, artists, visitors, and residents. Their functional areas were: the first is economy. Economy, the wealth and resources of a country or region, especially in terms of the production and consumption of goods and services. Economy have market attractiveness, economic vitality, business environment, and regulation and risk. Second is research and development. Research and development include activities that companies undertake to innovate and introduce new products and services. Researchers and development have research background, readiness for accepting and supporting research achievement. The third is cultural interaction. Cultural interaction is complex process involving different human beings within different formation. Cultural interaction have trend-setting potential, accommodation, environment, resources of attracting visitors, dining and shopping, volume of interaction. Fourth is livability. Livability is the sum of the factors that add up to communities' quality of life, including the built and natural environment, economic prosperity, social stability and equity, educational opportunity, and cultural entertainment and recreation possibilities. Livability have working environment, cost of living, security and safety, life supports functions. Fifth is environment. Environment, the surrounding or condition in which a person, animal, or plant lives, operates. These environments have ecology, pollution, natural environment. The last is accessibility. Accessibility is strongly related to universal design, which is the process of creating products that are usable by people with the widest possible range of abilities, operating within the widest possible range of situations. This accessibility have international transportation infrastructure and inner city transportation infrastructures. Thank you.
Good morning, ma'am. I'm Maricel Cabucos. This is my topic under Global City. Global City, an urban entry that enjoys significant competitive advantage and that serve as a hub with a globalized economic system. Cities where begin newly privileged site of local policies with the context of a broader project to configure state institution. The rule of global city is a city that has the power to affect global issues and change the global outlook. It can do this through a varied set of systems from politics to military and economics, controlling and adapting the role of global economy takes. A. Economic strength. Economic power is a ability of countries, business, or individual to improve their standard of living. Countries, companies, and individual can improve their income allows to purchase more better goods and service to meet their needs. B. Human capital is measure of the skills, education, capacity of attributes of labor, which influence productive capacity. Human capital of the economy determined by national education standard measure economic value for focuses on individual capabilities investment. Some concept of human capital it recognizes that all labor is equal, but employers can improve the quality of capital by investing abilities of employee. All have economic value for employers and for the economy as a whole. It is a process of institution engaged its self-evaluation to measure achievements and outcomes to institution mission provides leadership and wide strategy planning function decision making and planning in areas admission, financial, taxation. D. Financial maturity. When we say financial maturity, being financial maturity, it should not be confused with the financial independence or security, which most people strive for having enough assets and to support confident remain state with financial situation no matter what happened with the economy. Financial maturity it led financial sectors relative to the economy and other financial institutions and financial markets in the country. E. Global appeal. Fortune 500 companies frequency of international flight, international conferences and convention leadership in the higher education renowned think tanks. Physical capital. Physical capital, it represents in economic one of the primary factors of production. Physical capital is the apparatus used to produce a good and services. Physical capital is the tangible man-made goods that help and support the production and inventory equipment, cash or real estate, physical infrastructure basis for economy to function survive such a transportation network. G. Environment and natural hazard. Environment phases of natural hazard or natural disaster. Natural disaster include more droughts, floods, and other environment and natural hazard leading to a higher number of deaths and injuries as well increased economic losses. Natural hazard is further by ongoing environmental degradation, high population densities, is exposed area, events, and lacking or affect government policies. H. Social and cultural character. Social and cultural character, human rights must be different in economic, political, and social cultural characters of countries. Culture and human rights influence because culture affects all aspects of human life. Cultural rights illustrate the individuality and interdependence of all rights and freedom of expression of people in a more comprehensive fashion. Do any rights, cultural rights, often state of tension or conflict with other human rights.
Global city. So, it's also interesting to see what was included versus not included in a quality of life type rating. For example, items like censorship, media access, the rule of law in the environment are listed, but measures of upward social economic mobility or income inequality are not. So, we can see the rule of law and the environment are listed in the media access. It is the example that shows that it was included in a quality of life type ratings. When we seek also what is not included, we can say that the measures of upward social economic mobility or income inequality. So in this case, we can visualize what was included and not, and knowing the reasons of it. And it can also awareing of us how important giving study to know or see of what was included versus not included in a quality of life type rating. Next, a number of the rankings such as a self-consciously alike mindset, such as shopping and dining options. As many quality of life survey, this seems to orient them toward expatriate executive types rather than normal folk. So, it have many quality of life surveys. Those surveys seems to orient them toward expatriate executive types, like foreign people or person that having the power goods plan. Looking at this, I can help but think that the criteria of the product of an iterative process where the results were refined over time. Thus, in a sense, the outcome were likely somewhat predetermined. That's not to say that the game was rigged necessarily, but I suspect if anyone were doing a global city survey and London and New York did not rank at the top, the developers would question whether they got the criteria right. So, in a sense, global city is like obscenity. We know one when we see it, but we don't necessarily have a widely agreed upon objective set of criteria to measure it by.
Hi, good morning. My name is Lady for Artalipayan. So my topic for today is all about Global City. So number 1, Advanced Producer Services Production Mode. This basically Sasson's original definition. I think this will remain particularly important because the skills specialized and subject to clustering economics, the cities that concentrate in this function have booklet-like wide mode. So, producer services provide a firms that sell services primarily to the business community rather than individual and household. B. Economic giant. Namely, this is fairly simple but important view of the simple measure how big cities are on some metrics like GDP. So example of economic giant is United States. United States is the largest economy by nominal GDP and net weight. Because United States is one of the economy that still makes up 20% by global gross domestic product of quite a modest relative decline in recent years. C. International gateway. Measure of the importance of a city in the international flows of peoples and goods. So, international gateway is any facility that provides an interface and send and receive electronic communication. Example of voice, data and multimedia, image, video, cargo, and door-to-door delivery. D. Political and cultural hub. An important distinction should perhaps be made here between hubs that may be large but primarily national or regional importance. Political and cultural hub. Example of cultural hubs such as museum, galleries, and performance space that secondary attraction including food and retail. So, that's all. Thank you.
Hi, good day. I am Omar Aboris Libing. I'm taking Bachelor of Science in Social Work at Dr. Aurelio Mendoza Memorial College. Today I will discuss about the global demography. So what is global democracy? Global democracy trends and pattern. The global populations which stood at just over 2 billion in 1960 is 6.5 billion today. The world currently gaining new inhabitants at a rate of 76 million people a year. This is an example of world populations. So, in 1960 pa lang, parang 2 billion pa. So, increase the 1975, 15 years. So, bali, 4 billion siya. Up to 1990 to 2005 to 2020 is 6.5 billion today in the world currently. So in the past 50 years, the world accelerate in transitions out of long-term demographic stability. As infant and child mortality rates fell, populations began to soar. In most countries, this growth led to falling fertility rates. So, what's the importance of global demography? So the importance of demography, the study of demography is of immense importance to an economy. In the meantime, demographic change has created a birth generations which today appears in many countries as a large working age of populations. This cohort will eventually become a large elderly populations in both developing and developing countries. Most have agreed on middle ground in which population growth has no effect on economic growth. New evidence suggests that changes in the age structures populations in particular, raising ratios of working age to non-working age individuals led to the possibility of more rapid economic growth via both accounting and behavior effect. So that's all. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before anything else, I would like to introduce myself. I am Chester Liwanag Busya, taking up the course of Bachelor of Science in Social Work. So I'm here in front to all of you to report our topic. So our group topic is all about global population and mobility, a culture perspective. But my leader gave me this topic all about global demography. So, Ano yung unang maintindihan mo pag sinabing global demography? Ito yung pangkalatan or all over the world. So, and demography, so pag sinabi iting demography, ito yung pag-aaral ng populasyon. Kabilang na dito yung mga tao, at saka iba pa. So, global demography is a disparity in population growth between developed and developing countries reflect the existence of considerable heterogeneity in birth, death, and migration process, both over time and across national populations, races, and ethnic groups. So, pag sinabi natin global demography, ito yung differences in other country. So, kumbaga, ito yung mga differences ng ibang mga bansa, which is kung ito ba ay developed na ba or developing countries pa. So, nag-reflect ito sa existence of heterogeneity in birth, sa death, and also sa ethnic groups and others. So, yan ang ibig sabihin ng global demography. And next is Asia, Ireland, and Sub-Saharan Africa, or Sub-Saharan Africa ba to? So, ito yung the experiences of these places all serves as evidence of the effect of demographic change on economic growth or lack thereof. So, ang tatlong country na ito or places, sila yung country na gitagaan og gihimo og base or ebidensya nga kani nga country naay na ano ba to? Epekto ang demographic change sa ilang economic growth. Both internal migration from rural areas, urban areas, and international complicate. So, pag sinabi natin internal migration is ito yung to travel for education and economic improvement. So ang rural areas naman ay pag sinabi ng rural areas ay ito yung non-cities, walang mga building, mga ano lang sila lahat, farming and non-agricultural areas. Yan ang rural areas. Kumbaga sa atoa pa, bukid mo na gitawag og bukid. So sunod ang sa urban areas pod. So pag moingon tag urban areas, ito yung cities or town na non-agricultural jobs or mo gitawag na to diri sa tuwa og syudad. The overall implication of population growth for Palisili and the imperative for investment in health and education and for sound policies related to the labor, trade, and retirement. So, silang mga country, ang overall nga implication ani nila is sa ilang population growth. So, for Palisili is ang imperative investments sa health, sa education, sound policies. So, related ni siya sa trade, labor, and retirement. In addition for my report, this is all about for my continuation of my report. Understanding future trends is essential for the development of good policy. So, dali ra kay sabton, no? Understanding future trends. So, dapat atong sabton ang atong future para essential siya or naa siya yung development para sa atuang good policy. Demographic projections can be quite reliable but huge uncertainties in the realms of health, changes, and human lifespan. So, demographic projections. So, pag sinabi nating demographic projections, ito yung projected sa country kung ilang population growth ba or ilang mga tao na ba ang meron sa country or ganyan. Scientific advances, migration, global warming, and wars make over all predictions extremely uncertain. So, kani siya tanan kani siya tanan, global warming, migration, wars, mao ni siya ang prediction nga muabot or mahitabo sa tuang sa country nga pila ka years or pila ka decades gikan karon. So, demographics are important so that you can understand how customers search for the information and purchase products and services. Yes, tinuod. Importante jud kayo nga sa mga individual nga kabalo sila ang sa demographics para ang mga customers, ang mga individuals nga kabalo sila sa information o sa mga services. So, example no, as a student no, kana bang para makabaluta, para ma-search nato kung unsa atong dapat nga i-search kung unsa ang imong report anitan sa kuha karon no. I have a report, so gi-search na po siya ang uban. So ana ara. And so that would be all my report, and I hope nakasabot mong tanan, nasabtan ninyo kung mga gipang istorya gamay biskag kanang dili kay sa karo, pero I hope nga nasabtan jud ninyo. And once again, good afternoon and God bless. Thank you.
Global demography. Global demography is the study of human population, their size, composition, and distribution across space and the process through which population change.
Migration. To move from one country or locality to another. To move from an origin to a destination, or from a place of birth to another destination. Due to the nature of international data, migration is often conceptualized as a move from an origin to a destination. For example, measures of global bilateral flows are often based on movement from a country other than a migrant's usual residence for a period of at least a year or 12 months. Thus, migration is often seen as a permanent move rather than a complex series of backward or onward movements. The data omit return or circular migration as people who are registered in the same place as their place of birth are non-migrants, even though they may have spent considerable time outside their place of birth. For example, it is estimated that about 40% of English and Welsh migrants to the United States returned back to their home countries between 1861 and 1913. Between 40 and 50% of Italian migrants to the United States returned to Italy in the early 20th century, and rates of return of migrants from Argentina and Brazil at the same time. Particularly, Italians were similar. Viennese in 1991 and Nuggets in 1992.
Hi everyone, I'm Bibi Jane Canoy. My report is about global migration 4.3. How many of these migrants move back and forth is not known. a circulation between village and towns appears to exist rather than a simple movement from rural to urban areas. Pugo, 1982, Protero and Chapman, 1985, Skildon, 1990. 4.4. In the studies of contemporary international migration to developed countries, high rates of turnover among migrants have been observed. Between 1986-1981, some 17% of immigrants originating China, Hong Kong Special Administrative Region who had moved to Australia had not stayed long enough at their destination to be recorded in the 1991 census. And there was a particularly high attrition rate during the first year after arrival. This particular situation is complicated by the establishment of homes destination areas. Immigration impact. The available evidence suggests that immigration leads to more innovation, a better educated workforce, greater occupation, specialization, better matching of skills with jobs. In higher overall economic productivity, immigration also has a net positive effect on combined federal, state, and local budgets. Immigration importance. Immigration boosts America's economic growth and raises the general productivity of American workers by providing much needed skills. Immigrant workers allow important sectors of the economy to expand, attracting investment in creating employment opportunities for native-born American. Immigration. Settle as permanent residents. Immigration is the international movement of people to a destination country of which they are not natives or where they do not possess citizenship in order to settle as permanent residents of naturalized citizens. Definition of gross domestic product. GDP is the final value of the goods and services produced within the geographic boundaries of a country during a specified period of time, normally a year. GDP growth rate is an important indicator of the economic performance of a country. That's all.